Blessings, good evening. Today is a Tuesday, so we have a few questions, Dhamma questions have come in, and we'll endeavour to answer them. So, first question. Dear Luang Por, thank you for the teachings. Is the feeling of neutrality a form of dullness? Thank you. Well, as you probably are aware, that in the teachings of Satipatthana, the four foundations of mindfulness from the Buddha, one focus for mindfulness awareness is feeling, vedana. Every moment of consciousness has some kind of feeling, either pleasant, painful, or neither pleasant nor painful, which we often call neutral feeling. So that's going on all the time, whether we realize it or not. And often we don't realize it, and that's where much of our suffering comes from, because we unknowingly attach to the feelings and the perceptions around those feelings, or stimulated by those feelings, and this leads on to the arising of craving and attachment, because we're not fully aware of how we are being conditioned by our experiences of the world, sights and sounds and so on. So one thing Luang Por Chah used to point out regularly is, when you're practicing mindfulness, your aim is to bring up awareness in the present moment, maybe first of all with one single object as a way to train your mindfulness, such as the breathing, the breath. You focus on that. But as mindfulness becomes stronger and your ability to reflect wisely on your experience improves, then you can turn to be mindful not just of one single object, but all your 5 khandhas, we say. So that includes the vedana khandha, the feeling khandha. The feeling is like the tone of the experience. They say pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. That's one area you can just focus your awareness purely on the feeling of everything. It can be physical, like in your body or stimulated from your body, or it can be just mental, stimulated by memories and thoughts coming up. And you just focus on feeling, become very mindful of feeling. So it's not an easy thing to do, because it's invisible, really. You're focusing on the mind itself, which is what knows feeling. The mind is watching or observing itself. And feeling arises and passes away quite quickly. Sometimes it's very intense, so you notice it more. Sometimes it's very subtle, and you miss it. So it's a whole practice in itself. And what comes about is that you become aware of these 3 classes of feelings more and more. But the idea is that without attaching to them, without letting them stimulate craving. So we often say without forming a sense of self or ownership of the feeling, because that's what mindfulness and wise reflection allows you to do. It's just to know the feeling, but without grasping at it as a self, me, mine, myself. The more mindful you are, you can be aware of a feeling, but not let it lead to any kind of mental suffering. You just know it. So we say knowing feelings as feelings. This phrase Ajahn Chah used to use a lot. Feelings are just feelings. They're not my feelings. They're not inherently good or bad. They're just feelings. The way you react, or the way your mind reacts to stimulus. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. But there's no real person or owner of them. They're not a being, a person. They're just part of nature, a natural experience. So when you say, is the feeling of neutrality a form of dullness? Well, a feeling of neutrality can be the cause for dullness of mind, because neutral feeling is not very stimulating. You don't feel much. We tend to seek a lot of pleasure in life all the time because we like the stimulus, the feeling, the perceptions that come with pleasure. And we try to get rid of pain because we don't like that. It's hard to be with, hard to endure painful feelings. So we tend to be always looking for more pleasure and trying to get away from pain. And we often miss the bit in the middle, the neutral feeling, because it's not very stimulating. So something that's not very stimulating, doesn't bring you much, we tend to be dull towards, not very aware of, doesn't bring up much in the mind maybe. You don't notice it. You don't notice things that are just kind of neutral, unless you're really paying attention or developing mindfulness. So this is why they do become, stimulate dullness. So what you find when you meditate, especially if you've been sitting meditation and doing it for a while, is your mind can easily become dull because there's not a lot of pleasurable feeling maybe, or a lot of painful feeling because your body's got used to the posture. If mindfulness drops away, you're not so aware from moment to moment, then this more neutral states of mind and neutral feelings in the body as well that are becoming even more prominent perhaps, tend to encourage dullness. You know, if you're sitting meditation and nothing much is happening, it's very easy for dullness to arise, and you either go just straight to drowsiness, sleepiness, or if you're not totally asleep, you're aware but not fully aware because you're dull. You're just kind of numb, vaguely aware of what's going on. So you might say half asleep, half awake. It's very common for meditators. It's a big obstacle. When mindfulness improves, then you can be mindful even of neutral feeling, neither pleasant nor unpleasant. You can be mindful of it as an object of mind. Again, neutral feeling is just neutral feeling. That's all it is. There's no self, no person in that. But the mindfulness has to be quite continuous and sharp to do that. Otherwise, you miss it. So you can do an experiment, say like, you send your awareness around your body as you're sitting. If you're not doing anything else, you're just sitting there meditating, no other stimulus, no other things you have to do. So just send your mindfulness around your body, and what happens? You'll notice there may be some areas where there's aches and pains. There may be some feelings of pleasure, especially if you're more peaceful and you've been meditating a while. But there'll also be a large number of points in your body where you just notice there's nothing much at all. It's just neutral. Don't feel pain, don't feel pleasure. So the Buddha pointed out, when we're not very mindful, this neutral feeling tends to bring dullness. And just as an aside, animals, the animal kingdom, they're with a lot of dullness because their minds are not very bright and they don't think and they don't do much other than just try and eat and escape danger and procreate. It's their main kind of thing. So they actually, a lot of the day, they're with dullness. They don't go to sleep though like us because they're much more alert to danger. Their intuitive awareness is much, sharper than humans often. Humans develop a lot of comfort. We make society comfortable, and that can make us go dull as well because we're just stuck in habit, no danger, no problem, just kind of maybe not absolutely happy but not in much pain either. So then we just become very kind of dull. Because animals are not like that, they're more alert because there's more risk for them, more danger. So that keeps them from falling asleep when they're experiencing this dullness. But they are very dull in their nature, a lot of dull feeling, a lot of neutral feeling, a lot of dullness in their mind. But humans have that as well, maybe just for shorter bursts, shorter periods. So sometimes you have to investigate to become familiar. Well, what is dull feeling in the body? Not dull, neutral feeling. Neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling in the body, what does it feel like? And then even in the mind. As mindfulness improves, notice there are some moods, some mental objects, mental states that don't bring you much pleasure, but they don't bring you pain either. They're neither pleasant nor painful. So maybe just thinking about something when you're not particularly stressed, you don't have much pressure on you, you're just thinking about some task you have to do. It could be something very ordinary, or should I have a cup of coffee or not? Something very ordinary doesn't stimulate a lot in the mind. There'll be maybe neutral feeling there. If you're not mindful, it can still start to make you go dull. So that when you're dull, what happens is you tend towards sleepiness if you're not moving much. Or sometimes dullness also leads the mind to just go towards drowsiness and the dream state. And so we have a lot of daydreams. Different thoughts and images start to come into the mind, and we're not really fully aware of what's going on, but we're still having them, but not fully aware. Dull. For the noble ones, those who have developed the practice of satipatthana well, their mindfulness is well developed and they've abandoned a lot of greed, anger and delusion, or all for the arahants, they've abandoned all the mental defilements, or for other noble ones, at least some of the mental defilements are gone. Their minds are much brighter, sharper, more refined. Then they say the neutral feelings, neither pleasant nor pain, in the body and in the mind, become a source of happiness. Because obviously there's no pain. If you have a neutral feeling, there's no pain. So that's happiness, and it doesn't stimulate dullness because their mindfulness is well established. Their insight, clear seeing of the way things are is established. They know feeling is not permanent, it's not self. So neutral feeling is a form of pleasure. Subtle pleasure, you might say. But for the unenlightened mind, and for the person who hasn't developed much, satipatthana tends to condition dullness. So a lot of neutral feeling, a lot of dullness. Next question. Why do we train ourselves to let go? A perennial question. We're always going on about this, aren't we, as Buddhists? One time, Ajahn Mahabua, I was with him and he was asked this question and he said, we're not just training to let go, we're also training to hold on. And then the questioner questioned that, what? We're questioning to hold on? We're practicing to hold on? Doesn't sound right. He said, well, in the beginning of your practice, you've got to hold on to the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. Don't let go of that. You've got to hold on to the good qualities of mind that you're developing. Don't let them go, because the more unskillful mental states, the kilesa, will flood into your mind and replace them if you let them go too easily. So letting go is not necessarily something you just do with everything, in every situation. In the beginning we're training, so we hold on to the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. We hold on to our precepts. We hold on to meditation objects and techniques, maybe. We hold on to thought, because we use thought to understand the Dhamma. We listen to the Dhamma, so we maybe hold on to a teacher and the teachings they give. we hold on to the good karma we're making because it helps us in the practice. But in the long run, yes, we might let go of all these things. But you have to be ready before you're letting go. If you let go of everything too quickly, then you're lost. And you probably just follow your own opinions and end up with a lot of suffering again. And maybe in the world nowadays there's a lot of people who are just letting go of everything and they don't know what to do, where happiness can come from, how to live skillfully. You can observe that every day. So maybe in the beginning you let go of the worst things, what we call, the evil, unwholesome states we experience when they come up, unwholesome intentions based in greed, anger, delusion, fear, worry, anxiety. The worst side of those we abandon as quickly and as well as we can. And that's why we do hold on or develop precepts, because it helps us to let go of the coarsest, worst kind of behaviors, like killing and stealing and fighting and competing and telling lies and speaking in ways that cause disharmony in our group or family or workplace and so on. You abandon the coarse first, you let go of the coarsest things first, because they would block you from progressing in the path, so you have to let go of them. Anger towards people who have helped you, like parents and teachers and employers and people you live with, work with, even though you may not like them, but if you're meeting someone and you get angry with them over and over again, you'll suffer, and it may lead to a big obstacle in your life. So the coarse stuff you let go of first, and that sets you up to be able to let go of the more subtle attachments. So, as I mentioned, we cultivate wholesome qualities of mind, develop the precepts, develop meditation techniques, develop our mindfulness, develop the ability to reflect on, using the Dhamma we've heard, we reflect on our experience, and particularly to see the impermanent, unsatisfactory, and lack of self in experience. That can lead on to an even deeper letting go. But even then you're using wisdom to let go. So say contemplating impermanence, you're using that as a technique to let go of attachments that cause you suffering. Say attachment to your body or to feelings, to thoughts, formations, and perceptions. You need to develop the perception of impermanence first. So you're even holding on there a little bit, aren't you, to the perception of impermanence, but using it as a tool to see that things that you take as permanent, whether it's mental activity, the physical body, the material world, you're investigating your own perceptions that are wrong, the false perception of permanence, say, by developing the perception of impermanence. And when you're ready, the mind just knows things as impermanent. It doesn't need to hold on even to the perception of impermanence. It's just natural. But in the beginning, you may need to work at it. You practice bringing that perception up. Or the perception, this is wholesome karma for my happiness, the happiness of others. This is unwholesome karma for my suffering, the suffering of others. That's a concept, a perception that you use until you just know what is wholesome, what is not, and how to act appropriately. It's a training. So you're forever training in letting go, true, but you let go of the coarse first and the more refined mental states and attachments later. So one way of reflecting on this is the Buddha talked about the 10 fetters that bind the mind to the world and to suffering and to rebirth. And these 10 fetters you let go, the first 3 you let go first by letting go of Sakkaya Ditthi, self-view, Vicikicca, doubt, Silapatiparamasa, attachment to practices and rituals and so on. By letting go of those 3 fetters, one attains Sotapattipala, stream entry, the first level of enlightenment. Then the fetters, next two fetters of sensual desire and ill will, they're already weakened by stream entry, but they're weakened further, and one attains the fruit of Sakatagami, once returner. So Sakatagami still has some subtle aspects of greed, sensual desire, ill will, but it's very subtle, it's more subtle than the Sotapanna, the stream enterer, and certainly a lot more subtle than the average unenlightened person. And continuing practice, they completely abandon the fetters of sensual desire, ill will, so then attain the fruit of anagami, a non-returner. The anagami practices with the higher, what we call the more higher fetters, or the second group of 5 fetters, the attachment to rupa jhana, the pleasure, the experience of rupa jhana, arupa jhana, restlessness of mind, conceit, mana, and ultimately avijja, all ignorance. When the higher 5 fetters are abandoned, then they attain arahant, nibbana. So to attain nibbana, it's like a process of letting go. Faster or slower, the same things have to be let go of for anyone wishing to attain nibbana. So it's a practice of letting go. But you start with the course working towards the refined. Sometimes they talk about, compare it like going up a ladder. To go up a ladder, you have to step on the first rung, then you hold on to the next rung, step on that, and then the next and the next. But when you step up, each time you're letting go of the rung of the ladder that was below you until you reach the top. And when you reach the top, you let go of a lot of the ladder because you've moved up. So it's something like that. But they asked Ajahn Chah, what is the quick way to enlightenment? Because everyone wants shortcuts, one wants an easy way to practice, don't like all this effort of working to let go of attachments, because it's hard work. Everyone wants the easy, quick way. So they said, what's the quickest way to Nibbana? Ajahn Chah just said, just let go of everything. So it's like jumping to the top of the ladder in one go. But who can do that? Maybe 1 or 2 people can, but probably most people are going up step by step. Next question. How do you deal with the endless bullying and when someone is taking advantage of you even when you don't do anything back to them? There's 2 kinds of bullies in the world. They actually both come from the same source, but we talk about them differently. The first is the more normal one we talk about. It could be a family member who bullies you, a workplace colleague who bullies you, a neighbor who bullies you. Could be a group of people bullying you or a single person bullying you. These external bullies we meet with sometimes in life, and it's very difficult, sometimes risky, frustrating, disappointing, etc., etc. And especially if it's in a case when you haven't done anything to provoke them, very difficult to face. The other kind of bully, more subtle and less talked about, less known, is your own internal bully. Your own mental defilements are bullying you all the time. They're coming from ignorance, and the external bully, the person who's a physical bully or verbal bully, whatever in your life, their bullying behavior comes from their ignorance, directed at you maybe. Your own internal bully, your own greed, anger, delusion, is also coming from your own ignorance. It's ignorant behavior because of any form of bullying, abuse, taking advantage of, whether it's subtle or coarse, violent or verbal or in any other way, indirect ways. It's bad karma. It's coming from unwholesome mental states, which will come back on the propagator of that bullying behavior. They'll suffer for it. So that's one reflection, isn't it? This bullying behavior will lead to suffering in the future as a resultant karma. We say vibhaka karma. So in many cases, the best option is maybe just to be very patient with it, not to engage so much. If you can, just ignore it, but certainly not to fall into the trap of fighting, arguing, because that often makes it worse. I'm not saying in every case, but generally being patient, enduring a bully, will, with that understanding that their behavior is actually an expression of suffering and it's going to lead to more suffering for them without you having to punish them or do anything. It will happen because of the law of karma. And sometimes that gives us strength to deal with a bully because we know, this is, I'm not the one who has to go and police them or punish them because they're going to get their own suffering for this. That's only part of it, isn't it? Sometimes the practical approach, sometimes you have to avoid a bully, get out of there, depending on the situation. You have to avoid them, get away from them. Sometimes you have to get help from a third party, someone bigger or in a position to teach the bully, stop the bully, block the bully, help you in that case. So it just depends on who you are and what the situation is. So patience, sometimes get help, reflect on karma. If you can really get to the point where you understand karma and you're in control of your mind, even though you're in a difficult situation with a bully maybe, it will actually give rise to compassion. You realize this person is hurting themselves. But there's still the practical side, because it's maybe annoying and difficult for you. You may have to do things to protect yourself as well. But the reflection is, don't do those things in anger. That person is already causing suffering for themselves. And you start to act with compassion. And the same with yourself, isn't it? Yourself, your own bullying states of mind. The complaints, internal complaints, the negativity, the anger, the greed, I need this, why haven't you got me this? It's like the voice that's always dissatisfied, complaining, unhappy inside your mind. In a way it's similar. If you can just be patient and ignore it with mindfulness and wisdom, that's probably the best, isn't it? That voice won't do much to you if you ignore it. You have to be mindful, which is what we're learning. As you meditate, you get many bullies coming up during your meditation. I want to eat, I want to drink, I want to sleep, I want to go and talk, I want to do this, do that, all things stimulating fantasies and imagination. Or if you're in a more kind of negative mood, I want to get that person, or why is that person such a pain to me, or why am I so bad? Why am I so hopeless? You turn on yourself sometimes. These are all the voices of bullies that come up in your meditation. You also have to be very patient with that, establish mindfulness, and find some skillful ways to let it go. Not to don't feed the bully. Like Ajahn Chah used to say, the stray cat keeps coming to your back door. If you ignore it, it'll go away. But if you open the door and start feeding it, it'll move in and take over. And a lot of our mental bullying, that we bully ourselves under the influence of greed, anger and delusion, if you engage it, you indulge it, it will take over your mind, won't it? So we have to be patient, mindful with bullying, the external bully, the internal bully, but also sometimes we have to do things to protect ourselves to teach the bully. I mean, the ideal would be teach the bully to see the error of their ways. But quite often that's difficult because they're not ready to learn. So you just see what you can do in each situation. As a monk, sometimes we're bullied by people because they know we can't fight and can't argue and can't get them because we're monks. We have precepts and we have to practice in a kind of disciplined, self-controlled way. That's our goal. So some people take advantage of that and they'll verbally abuse you and they say, I did that, you're a monk, what are you going to do? They swear at you or they're rude to you. And so sometimes you just have to be very patient, but if you don't feed the situation, it tends to fade and end quite quickly. The very first time I had to give a Dhamma talk in the centre of Melbourne, Federation Square, on a Sunday morning, first time, so I'm fresh from Thailand, and don't really know Melbourne very much, and they invited me to give a Dhamma talk at the Thai festival. So I'm sitting on a raised platform, there's a lot of other monks there and there's a big audience, but these two guys walked up and they're drunk and they've been out all night, Saturday night, drunk we reckon, and one of them didn't even have his shirt on, he's just like drunk, swaying, very aggressive, abusive in his speech. So you might say a bit of a bully, and he came up to me and poked me and he said, "Oh, can you do Kung Fu? I want to have a fight with you." And I just said, "No, I don't do Kung Fu, I don't fight." And he didn't know what to do, I guess because he was drunk, maybe tired, but I didn't feed the situation, I didn't provoke him or argue with him, I just said, "I don't fight." He says, "He does fight." I say, "I don't fight." And he didn't know what to do. It's like, "Oh, you don't fight, okay." So after a while of me just sitting there, he walked off. So it's a small case of not provoking the bully and not feeding the bully, and the bully in the end, you ignore the bully and they just walk away. There's nothing happening here. Sometimes that's all you need to do, just ignore them and they'll go away. Next question. Dear Luang Por, thank you for the teachings. Is it right to say that to experience true peace, you have to face the fear that arises from your pursuit of peacefulness? Is fear the other side of peace? Thank you. Well, fear is one perception that we cling to, and it's an expression coming from ignorance, isn't it? The Arahant doesn't have fear, the Anagami doesn't have fear. The stream enterer has a bit of fear, but it doesn't lead them to break their precepts. They practice vipassana, so the fear is stimulated by some threat or some situation or some internal emotional state. The stream enterer will reflect on it as impermanent, not self, and let it go. The unenlightened person maybe not. Maybe they're not yet very well developed in their practice, so the fear may take hold of them and lead them to do things in fear. So if you're afraid, sometimes you do strange things, extreme things out of fear. You do things you might normally not do, or you do something that has consequences, so maybe out of fear of another person. Some people say the best form of defense is attack, so you're afraid of someone, so before you're so afraid of them that you don't let them attack you, you attack them first, out of fear. So we do things out of fear, but say a Sotapanna has established the 5 precepts in their consciousness, in their way of thinking, their way of acting, so even though they may be provoked in a fearful situation, they're scared of something, fear arises, it may still arise for the Sotapanna, they won't do anything in the sense of break their precepts. So they'll have to maybe internally deal with, manage their fear, the state of mind, but it won't lead them to steal, to physically hurt someone, to go and get drunk, whatever that fear might lead them to do that's unskillful. That won't happen for the noble ones. So they learn how to manage their fear and see fear as just a state of mind with a feeling, and it's an emotional state, trains of thought, but then these are all impermanent and they're not self, they can all be abandoned. And you're training yourself to do that. So gradually fear takes hold of your mind less and less, because you're seeing it now as a mental state that is not self. It's temporary, it's not self, it can be let go of. The more you have that clarity of insight, the less fear comes up, or the less it will bother you. And this is sometimes why monks who have overcome their initial fears in the practice about sitting meditation, maybe living the monk's life where you don't have a lot of guarantees of support, money, food and things. Sometimes you're living out in the forest, maybe alone or just in a small group out in the forest, so there's sort of feelings of loneliness, fear of ghosts, fear of disease, fear of wild animals. These can all come up. And you practice with them. But sometimes you reach a point in your practice where there's not much fear. You've overcome a lot of ordinary fears about things. You've seen those thoughts, those emotions as impermanent, not self, so they don't come up much anymore. Your attachments have been weakened by your practice. So then the monk may go off into the deeper forest to face more fearful situations, like staying in the graveyard or the cremation ground, by going off to the tiger-infested forest, by going somewhere where there's disease or there's danger in some form or other. They may push themselves or test themselves sometimes to stimulate fear. In order to let go of fear, you have to see it. But in the beginning of our practice, there's a lot of fears probably coming up or sitting in the back of our mind, so it doesn't take much to stimulate them. So you don't really have to seek out fear, it will come up. So that is a subtle fear as well. Say you attain some samadhi, some state of peace through your meditation, and you have bliss, you have piti and sukha, rapture, happiness arise. These are all very good, positive qualities, and they're very satisfying to the mind, so the mind might cling on to them. Not yet fully seeing them as impermanent, not self. Maybe the first one clings to the happiness of the meditative state that you've achieved. But then fear can also come in and this bliss I'm experiencing, what if I lose it? That's quite common. If you have a really strong blissful meditation, you don't want to lose it, so there's fear. Once you have something, then there's the fear of losing it. Whether it's money or person or a state of samadhi, you don't want to lose it. Or if it fades and you've lost it, there's the fear, I'll never get it back again. So even in meditation, in refined states of meditation, there can be some subtle anxiety and fear around them, but it's very subtle. It's not the same as the fear of a violent person or the fear of a disease that might kill you or something. But this is more subtle fear of just losing wholesome states that you've achieved. But the fear of attachment, the fear of death that's based on the attachment to the body as you, as a self, as a person, well, that will follow you right through your practice. It may weaken as you become a little wiser and more mindful, but it's only the anagami, the non-returner, who's completely abandoned fear, and the arahant. So you have to learn how to reflect on fear, and you start with the ordinary kind of fears that come up in daily life, fear of heights, fear of pain, fear of illness, fear of what other people will think, all that kind of stuff. But then later you may go deeper into the real attachment to life itself and the body, and contemplate fear on a deeper level. And when you see fear as impermanent, not self, in any situation, in any meditation or in any reflection you do, it releases a lot of energy because your mind becomes much more self-confident. If you overcome fear of different things, fear of pain, fear of death, fear of ghosts, fear of wild animals, fear of this and that, if you overcome fear, it releases a lot of energy, positive, good energy in your practice, and it helps you to be more confident, bolder in your practice. So sometimes we do have to really face fear and practice to see it. It's just a feeling, it's just a thought formation, it's not a self. These things can be abandoned, let go of. Next question, how should we contemplate beings that we hear about or read about but cannot see, such as devatas, nagas and ghosts? When I first became a monk, I had very little experience of ghosts and devas and all that, but I would read about them. Even the Buddha would talk about beings in other realms sometimes. Read about them in the commentaries, in stories from teachers, or actually hear stories from living teachers about these beings. Not often, but sometimes you would. So then it did start to stimulate doubts for me and questions. What are these beings? Where are they? How does it all work, the cosmology? So there is a lot you can read up about or listen to about what we call Buddhist cosmology, other realms of existence, invisible beings that the normal person doesn't see but we can talk about. For some people they find it helpful to understand more about karma by reflecting there are different realms of existence. And what is the karma that leads you to be reborn as a ghost, as a deva? And then stories, people who maybe can see things, monks who have developed psychic ability to see or know beings in other realms, to confirm, well, they do exist. All these kind of questions, and in that side of things, develop for me over time, practicing, meeting teachers, but practicing for myself, improving my own meditation, helped me to have more confidence, just to accept, first of all, maybe these things are true, and maybe have my own personal experience as well. But that's over a period of many years. But in the beginning it didn't matter, like the basics I learned about Buddhism don't depend on seeing beings in other realms or knowing about them even. I wasn't brought up hearing stories about nagas and devas, although, having said that, in most cultures there is a whole side of things, ghosts and, my dad used to tell us ghost stories when I was a kid. He's not a Buddhist, but you would have ghost stories. I'm from North Wales and there were lots of ghost stories there, some of them very, very scary. And they have, North Wales, they have, the Welsh flag has a dragon on it. They have dragons, English have dragon. So, wherever you're born in this world, often you are exposed in small ways to the idea that there may be beings in other realms. Nowadays it's all in movies and stuff, but in most culture, folklore and stuff, there is some of this stuff. So we shouldn't be too closed-minded, but then we don't have to rush to believe everything either. Just keep an open mind and study and get the principles of Buddhism right first. Practice of sila, development of samadhi, development of insight, clear seeing, what you might call vipassana, meditation, and helping people, practicing the Brahmaviharas in daily life. All these basic practices don't depend on seeing or knowing about beings in other realms. But if in the course of your practice you gain experience, things happen, you see things, you meet things, people tell you stuff, well, that's all information that you can process and gradually build up your own picture or understanding. And I think most people who meditate long term start to accept there probably are beings in other realms. There is such a thing as past life, future life. Many of the things you hear in the suttas and the commentaries, the truth, the possibility of them become more true. Yeah, it becomes more likely. And as soon as you start realizing that, then you realize everyone else does as well. So then you start swapping stories. And I remember one time at Wat Pah Nanachat in Thailand, the International Forest Monastery, I used to live there for a little while. It's built on a charnel ground, a place where people have been burnt for centuries. And so the belief is there's a lot of ghosts there. So most people say, ghosts? No. The Westerners don't think much about ghosts when they go and stay there at first, so nobody's thinking or worried about it. The Thai people are. The Thai people go to Wat Nanachat, it's like, oh, where's the ghost, where's the ghost? And they're scared. For the Westerners, they're not thinking much about that. But then over time, maybe somebody starts to believe in ghosts or has their own experience, and they blurted out one day, oh, I was having a sleep and some being pulled my leg. And sometimes they see something or they just feel the presence of some being pulling their leg, because that's sometimes what ghosts or devas do. And somebody says that, and then 2 or 3 other people say, yeah, I've stayed in that hut before and the same thing happened to me. And then suddenly people are going, oh, maybe it's a ghost, or maybe it's a deva, maybe it's a deva wanting us to sleep less and meditate more. And then maybe invite a monk who has psychic powers to the monastery and say, could that be a deva pulling the monk's legs? And they say, yep, there's a deva there trying to help you sleep less, meditate more. So sometimes swapping stories, people open up and you realize, oh, a lot of people have these experiences. But the important thing is not to make a big deal out of it, because it's not necessarily that helpful for training the mind in mindfulness and insight. It's more just like additional knowledge that may give you some reflection to help you, but it's not essential practice or an essential part of the practice, really. Once we get on to ghost and deva stories, we can be here all night, so probably won't. When I was a young monk at Wat Nanachat, we had one kuti. So many ghost stories about this one kuti in the forest. It's a really dark part of the forest, very damn dark. Small little hut, wooden hut, kind of smelly, mouldy. No one could live there in the end. We had to turn it into a storeroom for tools, and we'd keep kerosene there and hand tools there because no one could live in it, because they're always getting bad dreams, disturbed, ill, unhappy. And the final straw was one novice claimed he was thrown off the veranda, literally by some dark being throwing him into the forest, pushing him off. That was the last straw, so they closed it down. As far as devas go, well, sometimes people see devas. They've even seen them in this hall that we're sitting in. They tell me, but they keep it quiet. Most people keep it quiet when they see a deva, because they're worried some people won't believe them or think they're crazy. So that's probably a good strategy, is that you don't talk about it too much unless it's someone you trust, because some people take it the wrong way, don't they? So, plenty of stories. Save them for another day.